Good afternoon. I'm Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub. I am joined by a number of people for this press conference. Frankly, it couldn't come soon enough, yet we have some more time to go on what I call and what I hope to call forever Grace's Law. Joined by me are the two primary movers, Representative Craig Staats from Bucks County and Representative Chris Quinn from Delaware. We're also joined by law enforcement officials that help prosecute Grace Packer's murderers, Sarah Packer and Jacob Sullivan. I am going to turn the microphone over to Representative Staats, who will then introduce Chris Quinn after he speaks, and then they'll turn the microphone back over to me, and I will have some remarks, after which if anybody has any questions for any of us, any of the number of us that are arrayed here today, we will answer them at that time. So it is my privilege to introduce my partner, somebody that I'm very proud to be partners with in the hopeful passage of what I'd hope to always be called Grace's Law from here on out, Representative Craig Staats.
Thank you, District Attorney Weintraub, and good afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here today as we unveil an important package of legislation aimed to protect our youth across the Commonwealth. 5 years ago, an innocent teenager was suddenly and senselessly taken from us. Grace Packer was a young woman who fell victim to her adoptive mother and her adoptive mother's boyfriend, taking her life at just 14 years of age. Making this even more heartbreaking is that her murder was the culmination of years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse by the very people chosen to care for her. Leading up to Grace's death, her adoptive mother's boyfriend was imprisoned for the abuse. Yet Grace was not removed from the house or protected from the horrific and violent abuse which carried on until her very last day. The house where this murder took place is in my legislative district. I often drive by and can't help but think about the horrific events that took place there. We continue to mourn the loss of Grace and pray for peace and comfort for her family and friends. We've learned a lot from this tragedy. Most importantly, that the system in Pennsylvania has flaws and must be fixed to better protect our most vulnerable children. Grace ventured in and out of the foster care system through Bucks, Montgomery, and Lehigh counties. She ultimately fell through the unacceptable cracks in our system. Our aim with this legislation is to prevent another child from being lost in this system and condemned to cruelty and even death. There are more than 10,000 children in the Pennsylvania foster care system at this very moment, with more added every week. It is imperative that we update this system to protect the next Grace Packer. The first bill would address inconsistency in Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services law reporting. Currently, the law does not define the terms valid and invalid when a report of suspected abuse is investigated, nor does it provide any context for where or when the terms are used that might provide some meaning to the terms. This is just one piece of legislation we've introduced to ensure consistency in reporting. And at this time, I'd like to invite Representative Quinn from Delaware County to the podium to introduce additional two pieces of legislation in this package. Representative Quinn.
First, I want to thank everyone for coming today. We truly appreciate it.
Co-sponsors.
The horror which Grace Packer endured, which ended with her murder, is well known, and there's no need for me to recount it here today. I'm the father of 3 girls. My oldest is the same age Grace would be if she was still alive today. Never again should a child who is known to the Pennsylvania child welfare system be subject to the brutality that Grace experienced. For more than 5 years, there's been plenty of talk and very little action to address the gaping holes exposed by Grace's death in our child welfare system. In her memory, these three pieces of legislation are important steps in protecting our kids. Representative Staats already detailed House Bill 1845, which constitutes a valid report under the Child Protective Law. Our legislation package also includes two other bills, House Bill 1843 and House Bill 1844. One glaring weakness of our child welfare system exposed by Grace's case is the inability of our county child welfare agency to share or access information from other counties about children or families with whom they've come in contact. Grace's adoptive mother worked in this system. She knew its weaknesses, where the gaps were, that enabled her to stay one step ahead of the agencies by simply moving to a different county. Because the Child Welfare Agency and their new county of residence did not have access to the history of the former county, what should have been assigned was simply ignored or dismissed. The scrutiny of the child welfare officials never fell on Grace's family. For years, the Department of Human Services has been developing a statewide integrated child welfare management system to replace those in use in our 67 counties. We understand this is no small undertaking, but its development has dragged on for far too long. After my last inquiry, I was told that the system was projected to be complete and in use by the end of 2023. It's our understanding it may not even be ready at that point, and this is just unacceptable. House Bill 1843 would mandate the system be implemented by the end of the next calendar year. This just needs to get done. Another gaping hole in our Child Protective Services law is the discretion county agencies have in retaining records related to reports and investigations of child abuse and neglect. In Grace's case, as authorities attempted to reconstruct what went wrong and the records that should have existed, they were nowhere to be found. The State Office of the Inspector General has been investigating this case for more than 2 years. Perhaps the lack of records is what has impeded their investigation. At this point, we still don't know what happened because they won't tell us. Also, throughout the Child Protective Services law, county child welfare agencies often have the option to expunge records after only 1 year, without regard to whether or not the subject of the investigation lives or has regular contact with children. Expungement of those records is typically slanted in favor of those against whose the allegations have actually been made, the suspect. This is absolutely absurd. House Bill 1844 tightens these requirements and balances the goals of protecting children with the due process rights of those who are subject to the investigation of abuse or neglect. We know work has to be done on this critical part of our legislative package, but it's critical that we get started at this point. It's our hope that we can get this legislation moved into a committee so that we can do a little refining of the bill. But for more than 5 years, there's been little more than talk from the Department of Human Services, from many county child welfare agencies, and the Office of the Inspector General. We are resolved to work on these bills to ensure that no other child in Pennsylvania is subject to the horrors that Grace Packard endured. These children need our care, our concern, and the system that works to protect them, and we are hopeful that these bills, in Grace Packard's memory, will be just that. I'd like to turn the podium back over to the District Attorney.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
This is going to be difficult for me, so first I'd like to also thank Representative Todd Stevens, who I will be mentioning in my remarks, Representative Shelby Labs, and Representative Wendy Thomas for their support in what we're doing here today, which is long, long overdue. I'd also like to give credit to the entire prosecution team who was arrayed here, Job Joe, Cindy Patinato, Frank Groom, Mike Walp, Jen Shorn, and the Packer family. You'll see right next to me is a very, very brave young man. His name is Josh Packer. When we tried this case, couple of years ago, Josh authored a victim impact statement. And in order to honor Grace's memory, Josh asked that I read this while he stands by with me. This is what he had to say to the judge and the jury and to anybody that would listen. My name is Josh, and Grace was my sister. For the very first time, it is my turn to talk about what I want to talk about. Before this tragedy, Grace and I had a very hard life. We moved all the time, and we were never able to have what most people call normal. All along, everybody told me what was best for me, but nobody ever really asked me for what I thought was best. So today is my turn. When I lost my sister Grace, I was heartbroken. And I will never be able to have as happy of a life or as normal of a life as I would if Grace was here. However, something that helps me to feel better about Grace not being here today is the fact that today, Grace can become a hero. I would like everyone in the room to stop reading, turn off your telephone, stop playing with a pencil, and listen to why I'm saying this. I want Grace to be the person that you remember the second you leave here today. I want all of you to find a way to make sure that you watch out for all the kids so that a loss like Grace's loss never happens again. I want you guys to make sure that you do your best to help kids when they cannot help themselves. If all of you do this, it means that Grace's loss has value. If you will not help me make Grace a hero, I do not know how I can live with the loss with no reason for it. I know that Grace would do anything to make sure that she could help other kids. If she was told that she could save lives by the loss of her own very life, she would say, "What do I have to do? Please, this will help me heal. I lost everything that all of you take as normal. The best my life ever can be again is close to normal. But I can never have normal because of what has happened. If you all care about the impact of my loss, you will help make sure that Grace becomes a hero that I already know she is. My name is Josh, and my sister, who is a hero, was Grace. Thank you very much." Grace Packer was not a disposable child. She wasn't disposable when she was fostered by Sarah Packer and her then husband. She wasn't when she was then adopted by Sarah Packer. She wasn't a disposable child when she was kidnapped, beaten, raped, and murdered in Quakertown by Jacob Sullivan and her adoptive mother, Sarah Packer, in 2016, 5 years ago. And she must not be forgotten now, despite the passage of time without a promised Inspector General's report that we have now been waiting for 2.5 years. Grace Packer was murdered 5 years ago. The Child Protective Services System, failed in its mission to protect her. This proposed legislation, and I am very grateful to Representatives Quinn and Staats and Representative Todd Stevens for moving forward with this legislation. Despite not having a roadmap to do so, despite not having the report that was promised on the systemic failures that the Inspector General promised us over 2 years ago. We just can't wait any longer. Our most vulnerable children are counting on us to keep them safe. In April 2019, the Inspector General's office said they would be investigating these very issues, how the state's Human Services Agency handled information involving the case of Grace Packer and systemic issues and flaws. The focus of that investigation was to examine the Department of Human Services' role in ensuring the safety of children, of our children, who are suspected of being abused, and whether employees at that department failed to detect problems in the handling of Grace Packer's case. At the time, the Inspector General called the investigation a priority matter, and the review would be targeted and expedited. If this is targeted and expedited, I'd hate to see what a routine investigation takes, how long that takes. The office said that those findings would be made public. That this has not been done yet is a systemic failure when it is a matter of life and death. That's enough failure. No more children like Grace should have to die before we do something about it. I've often been asked, what do I envision Grace's law to be? There are multiple places that the law can and should change in order to protect foster children and children under the aegis of Child Protective Services. And these are my hopes for Grace's law, that social workers get increased vetting. All Children's Services Agency and the state need to communicate with each other and allow police access to information when they ask for it. And frankly, thanks to Representative Stevens, we've accomplished that part of the goal, because that has now been signed by Governor Wolf into law. The first bill, set to be introduced by Representatives Staats and Quinn, calls for Pennsylvania's statewide child abuse database to be fully implemented, not in 2023, but in 2022, within months from now. The second bill would bolster the Child Protective Services law, requirement for county child welfare agencies to retain the records. For without the records, there is no trail. There's no way to trace back. There's no way for us to catch these people so they can't strike again and again. This is great in conjunction with Representative Stevens' bill to improve communications among agencies. These two bills in conjunction, Representative Quinn, Staats, and Stevens' bills all together, will make sure that our children are protected rather than preyed upon by the people in Child Protective Services who are sworn to protect them. There's an old proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, but the next best time is right now. This is the time for action. Let's uphold our duty to protect our children. Let's get Grace's laws passed. Our most vulnerable children can't wait any longer. I will ask Representatives Staats and Quinn to come forward. If you have any questions, we'll take them at this time. Deanna.
Starting with the records, in the case of Grace and a lot of the other foster children, that was through one private agency where she worked prior to Northampton County. I'm told by foster children they went back to get their own records from that agency and they were destroyed. So would this also apply to those private agencies, or would it mean that the county would have to keep copies of all of those records?
Do either of you want to address that?
The goal of the
Come forward, Chris.
The goal of the legislation would be all records, whether it's of the county or the private organizations. The goal is to keep a record, period. If you're interacting with a child and you're suspected of committing some type of abuse towards that child, we need to have a record of it because it makes it impossible to investigate a case without it.
Any other questions? All right, great. Thank you all very, very much.
If you're the only one, I'll jump back in.
Deanna, you've never been shy before.
So, with the Inspector General's report, I know I've reached out to them. Have you reached out to them today saying, hey, we're having this press conference? If you have a report, maybe you show it to me?
I have not. Have either of you?
Speak to that.
Sure. I don't mind. Okay.
The last communication we had was back in January. Representative Quinn and myself sent a letter to the Inspector General requesting this report. The only response we got back was that it's an ongoing investigation. I can't give us any information.
How soon can we expect to see this? If we can bring the House back for a session on school masking, can't we get everybody back in quickly and get this done? As you all said, 5 years is too long.
Yeah, agreed. We agree. And as you know, we're going back Monday, and yeah, hopefully this starts to move through the process.
So can you just put it out there first, Monday? Here, I've got something for you, people.
Well, the first thing that's going to happen is going to land in committee, and this will be the Children and Youth Committee, and then it goes through the process. So yes, we hope to expedite this very quickly.
And Craig and I are working directly with Representative R-Delaware. So this isn't something that we're doing in a vacuum. We're doing this in conjunction with the committee. So I have very high hopes that this is going to move very quickly through that committee.
Good point.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you coming out today.